Hey, before we get into the podcast, I just want to thank this week's sponsor. This week's sponsor is Sock Panda. They are a monthly sock subscription service, and I have personally bought them for members of my family, specifically my daughter. She absolutely loved them. Once a month, she'd be able to go out to the mailbox and get a new pair of socks, and it was always a surprise on like what they were. Sometimes it was like a surfing squirrel, and other times there were aliens. It was just pretty much all sorts of socks for everything you could possibly imagine. And they have men's socks, women's socks, tween socks, kids socks, and you can go on and you can purchase just one set, or you can get a subscription, and it makes for a great gift. And we're heading into the holiday season, and supply chains are an issue, so this is going to be a great gift that gives for the whole year or 6 months or however long you want to sign up for the sock subscription. And even better than that, the Sock Panda team is dedicated to using its socks to make the world a better place. The company donates socks to those in need for every purchase. As of today, the company has donated over 141,000 pairs of socks to homeless shelters, low-income senior centers, hospitals, and underprivileged classrooms throughout the country. You can't go wrong with Sock Panda. They make great stuff, and they do great things. And today, they're giving our listeners a 15% discount. So you can go to sockpanda.com/discounts/Inebri-art15 to get 15% off your order. And we just want to say thank you to them for sponsoring the show. And make sure you go there and get some socks for yourself or for your loved ones this holiday season. Welcome back, Inebri-ites. This is Andy of the Inebri-art podcast, and I'm up a little early today, for me anyways, because we had there's time zones and they're difficult, and I'm not gonna lie, the first time I wrote this in my calendar, I wrote that it was 8 p.m. not 10 a.m. because I added 5 hours instead of subtracted. But we are joined today by Kit Buss, who is in London. Welcome to the show.
Hello, good morning. Thank you for getting up early.
It's not that early. I'm lazy. That's really what the point. It's not the time of day.
Same here.
Yeah.
Same here. It's a Friday, so it's almost the weekend.
Yeah, just about. Although I feel since like COVID rolled around, I honestly have absolutely no idea what day of the week it is. I went to
God, no.
A local drive-in was doing the Rocky Horror Picture Show with the full shadow cast and everything. And I'm like, oh man, my daughter would have loved this. I should have brought her. I'm like, but it's a school night. And they're like, Andy, it's Saturday. And I'm like, oh, right,
oh
it is,
no.
So.
Yeah, time is very much an abstract these days.
But so Kit, you're an illustrator or comic book artist. Is that like how you would describe yourself?
Yeah, I guess so. I suppose that's probably the most accurate way to put it. It covers most of the bases. So was
comic books always kind of like an industry you were looking to get into, or did you kind of more happen into that? So I know a little bit about you, but only from a certain point that I think you can guess when I
sure the logical jumping on point. So I mean, when I went to university to study traditional animation back in the day, and that was initially what I sort of had in mind. I went into it thinking, I love animation, and traditional animation is the best, and this is definitely what I want to do. And after 3 years studying it at university, I came out the other side going, this is not what I want to do at all. It was a valuable experience in that regard. But obviously, for anybody who knows, even a little about animation, it's very hard graft. And I think you really have to love it. And I definitely loved it as an audience member, but was not so good at it as an animator. And so I kind of came out of that and floundered a bit, thinking, oh gosh, well, I'm about to graduate and I have no idea what I'm going to do. And I grew up sort of reading comic books and got into them in a big way in my teens, reading X-Men and sort of quite a lot of Nightwing as well and that sort of stuff. And then kind of got into manga and anime and that sort of thing around maybe about 18 or so. And it was a visual medium still, and it was storytelling, which was, I guess, the main crux of what I wanted to go into, was telling stories. But yeah, it was kind of it was a sidestep that just kind of occurred. And I had some friends who were also very into comics and drew comics, and we formed a studio. And that then led to, we had some friends who were already very well established in the industry at the time. And basically through happenstance, a friend of ours who'd been approached to work on a project with Leah Moore and John Reppion and Channel 4 over here in the UK. She didn't have time to work on this comic they'd approached her about, but she came to us and basically said, well, would you be interested in doing it in my stead? So she designed the characters, and the studio that my friends and I had formed, we jumped on as the artists, and that kind of got the ball rolling. And from there, it was, I've been doing comics in one way or another ever since.
There's so much of that story that I relate to. Like, I went to art school and I'm like, I want to be a comic book artist, because I grew up like 2 blocks from a comic book store and was, I had, I don't know, thousands as a kid. Got to school and I'm like, I don't know if that's what I want to do. And kind of, the same thing, floundered and, ended up working retail a lot. And it took me kind of years to kind of figure out exactly what it is I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. But I also love the so much, especially when you're kind of freelancer and independent, it comes from that networking and someone getting too busy, or someone being like, oh, do you know who's perfect for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's so valuable, and it's interesting because I see, you sort of see these occasional kind of stigmas that pop up online particularly amongst, I guess, younger artists, that kind of say, you mustn't use reference images because that's cheating, or you shouldn't network because, you should be doing it on your own steam, kind of thing. And honestly,
really, that's a thing that people say? That seems so insane.
It's bizarre, because I've seen people come at it from the angle of saying, it's basically stepping on people to get somewhere. And I see how, I see how people get there. But in my experience, very much, I think, pretty much every gig I've ever landed, every professional gig, has been as a result of knowing somebody who was looking for an artist at the time. And I also think, it's pretty much any creative industry it's a fairly small industry. I think when you get to a certain level, everyone knows everyone else.
Right.
So it's always in your best interest to, I guess, to put it very bluntly, to not be a dick. Right. Like, make good connections, make friends, and and like you say, work goes around. Like, the number of artists that, it's a supportive community. So if you know people, or you have friends that kind of get approached for a job and they have to turn it down because they've got too much on, or they're tired, or they're not in a position to work on the project at that time. And having been in that position myself, it's always kind of nice to be able to turn around to the person who's approached you and say, well, I can't do it, but here's a couple of names of people who I think would be really good for this. Partly out of, because you want everybody to have a crack at sort of having a go at doing stuff, but also because, you don't want to leave this person in the lurch and just go, right. Oh no, sorry, I can't do it, you're on your own.
I would love to ask those people about, not networking, be like, well, what if you had too much work and someone came to you? Would you not recommend like your best friend?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, in as far as I've kind of come across it in the past and been part of that community, it's always been a very healthy, very supportive kind of thing, the networking. It's not emphatically not a case of stepping on people to get where you want to go, and that should never be the case. But in insofar as knowing people and being able to collaborate with people that you want to work with and stuff, it's to my mind, it's pretty essential. So
I always find it interesting, the quote, "it's cheating" mentality of, like you said, using reference photos. I mean, everybody uses reference photos. I'm kind of astonished by that. But it seems like it's that way in every creative field. And the more that technology kind of kicks in, the more that you see that. I was at an open studios, and I walked into the studio, and they manufactured scale models for museums. So it was like battleships and airplanes and that sort of thing.
Oh, wow.
And I was kind of like looking around, and I kind of turned to there was like, I think there were 3 guys there, and I'm like, all right, which one of you guys hates 3D printers? And like they all laughed, and one guy's like, it's cheating and blah blah blah. And I'm like, it's like anytime there's like new technology that comes in, there's like the people who gravitate to it and like, this is a huge awesome tool, and the other people who are like, no, it's cheating.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, particularly, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I remember back when I was looking at studying traditional animation, I went through that mindset very much so. I used to be very much a proponent of the whole thing of, traditional 2D animation, all the hand-drawn stuff, that's the only way, that's the true craftsmanship. And, digital animation, 3D animation they only do it because it's cheap and it doesn't take as much skill because the computer does it all for you, which is such an uneducated position to take.
Yeah.
I have friends now who work in the games industry and work doing 3D animation. And I've seen the amount of work and the amount of skill that goes into it. And particularly like recently, my husband and I have been watching through Arcane. And that shit's just mind blowing. It's so good. And I look back on, having had that position when I was younger and just think, man, that's it's such a narrow-minded stance to go, just because you're drawing this with a pencil and paper, it's somehow more valuable.
I wonder how far that goes back. Like if there was some borderline prehistoric guys, like a hammer, you're using a hammer, I nail things together with rocks, like a real craftsman.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, none of this newfangled metal stuff, stone is the way. But yeah, it's I think also like people, there's it's such an interesting thing because obviously with things like Procreate and stuff as well, which is predominantly what I work in these days, mostly just because it's efficient, because obviously when you're working professionally, having an undo button is nice and efficient. But yeah, I did a live sketching panel at Thought Bubble recently.
Mm-hmm.
And I was up there with 3 other artists, and all of it. And I went into it thinking, oh my God, why have they asked me to do this? I haven't drawn with a pencil. My younger self would be horrified. I haven't drawn with a pencil in like 4 years. I'm going to embarrass myself horribly. And when I got there and I was talking to the other artists, all of us were stood there going, oh God, why have we said yes? We all work traditionally. How are we going to cope? Oh, sorry, not traditionally. We all work digitally now. How are we going to cope? But yeah, it's such a funny thing. You're right. Like technology, with like 3D printers and the fact that digital software nowadays has fairly good dupes for traditional media, like paint and watercolor brush sets and that sort of stuff.
A friend of mine showed me a watercolor app that he uses, and I was like mind blown, because it does everything traditional watercolor does, but then it does so much more. And be like, oh, it's wet, it's dry, oh, I want it wet again, And it's just like, it almost seems unfair.
Yeah, it's amazing, like how versatile, and it opens a lot of doors. Like using Procreate has made me certainly a better painter, where I'm horrible with traditional media, but then I have friends that ink and paint traditionally and that sort of thing, and I look at what they do, um, and I have so much respect for it, because I'm just like, gosh, you've really got to be sure before you put pen to paper that you know exactly, that you're confident that that stroke is going to be in the right place.
Right. Yeah. There's no undo
Um,
button for that.
no, exactly. Um,
It's so interesting, and it's like the one thing that I always kind of, and again, I come from, older school comic background. Not that I worked in the industry, just my experiences. That with the digital art, there's no originals. Like, you can't go and buy original comic book art. You can't buy the
yeah.
animation cells. So I feel like some of that collector fun can't be experienced in the same way.
Yeah, this is an interesting conversation that I've had with my husband a number of times, because he's a big reader. He absolutely loves reading, loves particularly sort of South American literature and that sort of stuff. And he gets very disappointed and frustrated, because when I want to read a book, I'll go and sort of look it up, and I'll get it on Audible so I can listen to it while I'm working, or I'll sort of go and have a browse in Waterstones, or smacked wrist, but I'll go and look on Amazon, that kind of stuff. And what he likes to do is he likes to buy all of his books secondhand, which I'm now trying to do more of as well, because to him, he's like, the trouble now is that there's no sense of excitement anymore, because if you're looking for a particular book, that if you go online and you type in the title, you'll just find it. It will pop up in a dozen places, and they'll have it ready there and in stock and stuff. And you lose that magic, in similar sort of thing with singles, when you go to a comic shop, of that kind of chance find of something that you've been looking for ages, and you've not been able to track it down, and it's out of print, or there was a limited run or something, and there's that amazing buzz, that magical feeling when you find it and you pick it up and it's there in your hands, and you're like, I found it, it exists. And it's like it makes it treasure again, I guess, which is something that I think is we've lost a little bit with the advent of convenience and digital stuff. And
for sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I used to own a comic book shop, and it was kind of like right around the dawn of eBay, and
right.
it was so. It was such a great tool, but it really took away that the search, the treasure hunt. And when I started, I'd come across something amazingly rare, and people would come over at a comic book show just to see it and be like, "Oh my god, can I look at it? How much is it?" And then people would be like, "Oh yeah, there's one on eBay that's going for a little bit less than that," or
Yeah. It really does kind of, it sucks the magic out of it. And it's something that I am trying to do a bit more of now, particularly when I go to conventions now that they're back. Thank goodness, because I've really missed doing them. Is kind of taking along like a little stack of A5 cardstock. I don't know what size that would be in American paper sizes, but like kind of about half a page size or so. And just taking a pencil and an eraser and doing kind of one-off sketches that I can then, I'll sometimes take commissions at the table, sketch commissions, that kind of stuff. because it's nice to know then that there are some pieces out there in the world that I've not drawn in a pencil brush on my iPad. They are not duplicated anywhere. That is a one-off, and it's the only one. And particularly with kind of with some Critical Role stuff that I've done in the past. I've done, a couple of, I think I've done like 1 or 2 Vax sketches, or something of Percy or Keyleth, and I'll have them on the table. And it's nice to know that when someone who really really loves the show or loves that character, that they get something really special that doesn't exist anywhere else, and that's just theirs.
What is this Critical Role you speak of? I've never heard.
Oh, well, I mean,
there might be 1 or 2 listeners out there who haven't heard of it.
Sure. So the main thing that I guess I'm known for is there is this small
It's a little show.
Dungeons and this little show, this Dungeons and Dragons streaming show, that is played by a group of extremely skilled, very talented voice actors based out in LA. Nerdy ass voice actors. Yeah. That's the one.
I've watched it once or twice.
Oh well, it's basically their D&D game. It's a streaming show that started, goodness me, back in 2015, I think. Then they've just started their 3rd campaign. But way back in the day, in their first campaign, which was the Vox Machina campaign, I was the official artist and the character designer for the show, which was an enormous pleasure, and I was very fortunate to work on it. And that's kind of, despite I like getting into comics and doing freelance artistry and that sort of stuff out of university. Critical Role was basically the springboard that allowed me to go fully, to go full time with it, which I am eternally thankful for, because now I get to draw elves and dragons and for I guess non-copyright infringement reasons, things that look an awful lot like tieflings but aren't. So yeah,
they're human demon hybrids, not tieflings. Totally different.
They are. They're demons. They're demons. Yeah. So yeah. So for a bit of context, that's the main thing that I am known for.
They've always been so supportive of their fans' artwork, where they every single show they put up, kind of like a slideshow of it. And some of their fans are legitimate comic book artists. Like, I've seen names I recognize. How did you get involved in that? Did you just kind of get singled out, or did you contact them? Like, how did that even come about, that you became the official artist?
Yeah. So basically, as a I suppose completely unconnected thing, I am quite a voice actor geek. I'm horrible to watch any show with voice acting in it, because I'll sit there and I'll voice spot. Years and years ago, I used to basically work as a volunteer, as a chaperone and a liaison for the voice guests at one of the big London conventions. Mm-hmm. And we had Liam over as a guest one time. And Liam being Liam, he was super chill and incredibly friendly. And we hit it off and hung out a lot over the weekend. And at the time, I think I was watching Wolverine and the X-Men, and he'd voiced Nightcrawler and Angel in that, who were basically 2 of my favorite X-Men. So I was nerding out really hard. And yeah, we became friends basically, and we just stayed in touch afterwards. And he contacted me a little while afterwards and basically said, so I have this game, this D&D game that I play with a couple of friends at home. And I want to get a commission done of the party. Is that something that you'd be interested in doing? And I was like, oh yeah, sure. No, that sounds amazing. I'd love to do that. And then never got back to him about it. Completely forgot about it. Very super pro, right?
Yeah, it sounds like me.
Yeah. And then the next show, we actually had Laura and Travis over. So I was kind of, supervising them and walking around with them and stuff. And through the course of conversation, we kind of realized that, oh, these are two of the friends that play in Liam's D&D game. And they were like, oh, you're the artist he was talking about getting a commission for. And Travis, when we were chatting, he basically said, so we're actually thinking of streaming a couple of episodes of our home game. We don't know how many we're going to do. We don't know how it's going to go. But we'd like some assets. We'd like some artwork to go with this stream we're going to do. Would you be up for doing that for us? And this time I didn't forget, and I was like, yes, yeah, that sounds awesome. I would love to do that. And so I got sent an email. With, I think I was kind of working. I did meet them all eventually. They actually very kindly flew my husband and I out to LA, which was when I guested on the show. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I was sort of working, I think, through Liam initially as sort of liaison, and he sent me an email with the descriptions of all the characters from each of their players. And Liam's one predictably was several paragraphs, very detailed, very specific about this many pouches on Vax's belt and the length of his hair and the vibe and all this kind of stuff. And then and it ranged from that level of detail to like Laura's description.
I figured Sam's would be the shortest.
Yeah, well, I can't actually remember what Sam's was off the top of my head, but the one that does stick with me is Laura's, which was just make me look hot. And that was it. Yeah. So I think Sam's was pretty good actually, off the top of my head. But yeah, so I got the descriptions through, and we just kind of went from there, and rest is history. So
I don't mean to say that you cheated at this, but that sounds like networking to me.
I mean, one could call it that. It's very much. I think the funny thing about networking is I suppose at the end of the day, like making friends is the best way to put it, because you're working in an industry, you want to get on with the people that you have that you may well be working with in the future. It's good to have good working relationships with people, but it's also that you're basically getting yourself in people's minds for a job. So that when I had someone recently approach me for a project where they got in touch about this, and they basically said, we want to hire you because we think you specifically, your style, the way that you design stuff would be perfect for this. And that it doesn't really, you don't get a much bigger compliment than that. That's a lovely thing to hear. Right. And that's really what I suppose you're doing with networking, is you're kind of getting your work and your name and yourself in as many potential collaborative partners' minds as possible, so that if they have a project and they think of you and they think, oh yes, that person would be really good for this, I really want to work with that person, you're then there, you're kind of on the short list. So which facilitates all kinds of things. So
I think like the best networking is when you're not even really intentionally doing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of out hanging with like-minded people. And it's kind of the premise behind this entire podcast is, I feel like if someone who doesn't know you, Kit Bus, or whoever else we have on, and they're a listener to the podcast in general, and they come on, they're like, wow, she seemed like a really cool, likable person. Let me Google to see what she does. And it's easier to gain a fan that way than just trying to be like, go here and look at my drawings. And
yeah, exactly. I mean, social media has been such a, for all its flaws, social media has been such a game changer, I think, particularly for freelancers and for people in creative industries, because as I'm sure you'll know yourself that when you're working as a freelancer, you are sort of also your own marketing department. You are putting your work out there online, and you're if you're selling your own comics or you're doing your own writing, that kind of stuff, you're basically you're having to sort of put that out there and put it in front of people and go, this is why you should read this thing that I've done, or this is why you should get me to, why you should give me money to draw a thing. And so, oh gosh, I've I started off on that, and now my train of thought has spun off, and I can't remember where I was going with it.
That's normal for the show.
Yeah, I'm not even drinking. I don't have an excuse. Yeah, it's been a game changer, and I think because of that, because people have that direct line, and they're getting some of your personality with it, it becomes much more a whole package sort of thing. So it's easier to it's easier for people to go and kind of Google you, or to come away with I suppose a more complete impression of the person. So no, it's a really good idea. But there's equally a possibility that people will come away going, wow, she talks a lot.
Actually, they're probably like, Andy didn't talk much this episode. That's awesome.
Oh no, I'm sure that's not true at all.
But you said you've been to conventions, and I mean now you've been on both sides of the table, and this kind of like jumping back to what we were talking about before, how that kind of the drive for that search and that treasure hunt is kind of over. And it made me think about how I've seen a lot of people complain about like, oh, there's no comic books at comic book shows anymore, or they're all about cosplay, or they're all about Artist Alley or these photo ops. Do you think that is the byproduct from that convenience shopping, where if I really want to find Giant Size X-Men #1, I can just Google Giant Size X-Men #1 and find half a dozen of them instead of trying to find one at a show that's at a price I can afford?
It's interesting because I can only really speak from the point of view of UK conventions. I've never actually been to a US one. But I guess using Thought Bubble as an example, which was the show that I was at recently, that convention, it was my first time there, and I'd heard nothing but good things about it from other friends who are all professional artists. And they basically described it as a convention that is just the Artist's Alley part. It's a comics dedicated convention.
Yep.
And I think what was, aside from the fact that it had a really lovely atmosphere, it was so nice because, Artist Alleys, in my experience, I can only speak from, but they always have this vibe of being very community oriented, very supportive, because everybody's selling something completely different. You move from one table to the next, and you get a completely different style, a completely different perspective, a completely different kind of storytelling. And I think that's such a great thing. And it was lovely because I managed to get away from the table at one point and sort of do a quick circuit. And the amount of variety and originality that was present, and you had veteran industry professionals there who had worked for all of the big names. They'd worked for Dark Horse and Marvel and DC and Top Cow and all this kind of stuff. But then you also have the people, you have the students there who are doing this in their spare time, that are, it's their first convention and it's their very first comic, and there isn't much on their table, but it's their first outing. You have such a breadth of experience and like I say, kind of I guess brand or style. And insofar as that, I think that's great, because places like that that is the place where you're going to find something that you can't find anywhere else. You're going to find stuff, a lot of people who are self-publishing, for instance, where you won't get it in the big comic shops, and you won't be able to get it through big retailers. They may be selling books that don't even have an ISBN number. You will be getting something that you can only get from them. And I think that has that same kind of magic of the treasure hunt for me. But in terms of kind of the bigger shows where it has become increasingly about meeting actors or celebrities, or getting signings done, photo ops, cosplay masquerades, all that kind of stuff, even like the sort of increasing presence of fan art in places like Artist Alley, stuff that draws on bigger IPs. I think it makes sense. I think it's a kind of an inevitable thing as shows get bigger and bigger. And I think it's also kind of inevitable with the fact that you have a really big appetite from fandoms these days. Again, in terms of how social media has changed things, the fact that fandoms are so much more engaged now, and that I think there's a much heavier presence on that sort of thing, that people want to come and express a love or indulge in kind of an enthusiasm for something, a show or a series or whatever that they're really into. But I think to come back off that enormous tangent and back to the original question, I think there's both. I've seen both. I've seen a lot of stuff that is the kind of increasing presence of merchandise and fandom and big IP and that kind of stuff. But I think there is also a very, very sturdy presence still of the original stuff, where you have, whether it's self-publishing comic artists who are just starting out, that are doing only indie press stuff, to professionals that are also tabling in places like Artist Alley, where they have folios of their original pencils or their pages of original inks, that sort of stuff, for the big name things that they've done. So I've seen both, and as far as I can tell, from my limited experience, there seems to be a very healthy continuation and presence of both.
Have you had that kind of experience? I have done some time in Artist Alley as a, that fan art that you mentioned. And one specific experience, I was at Hartford Comic Con, and a gentleman came up to the table, and he pulled out an 8x10 sheet of paper, and it had my name on it. And then he had gone and he must have like Google searched me, because he had a series of images that I had done that I typically weren't even on my table. And he asked me to do a sketch on that sheet for him. And it blew me away, because I'm like, he must have gone through the list of people and found who he liked, and then Google searched me. And so it was really surreal. Have you had, like, what was your first kind of like con experience where like, holy crap, that's a fan of mine? Like, I found that very bizarre.
It's definitely something that never gets less. This sounds super uncomplimentary, but like, it never gets less strange. It's really humbling. But yeah, I think probably the first instance of that really sticks out in my mind was I think I had, because coming up in sort of doing comics and that sort of stuff, I had mentors that I really looked up to, and that I remember meeting when I first met them, through portfolio reviews and that sort of stuff, and being so nervous, and now they're good friends and have become so over the years. But I remember tabling one time, I think it was at a London MCM, and there was a girl who was probably in her late teens, came up to the table and was chatting, and she mentioned that she was an artist, and I sort of asked, do you have anything on you that I could see, because I'd love to have a look. And she brought out her sketchbook, and when she put it on the table, her hands were shaking. And it was such a strange moment, because it was like, God, I have been that person. I am still that person in certain moments,
Yeah.
And it was the first time that I'd ever really kind of clocked someone being that nervous about me seeing their work. And it was a really strange moment, because I was like, but why? Like I'm no one, like, but it was, it's a strange feeling. And incredibly flattering when somebody, when somebody really likes your work in particular, and they're excited to meet you. And it doesn't get less weird, but it's always so kind of astonishing. And it's also, I suppose, it's nice to think that that all of the times when you've been coming up and you've had mentors and you've had people that have put your name forward for something when you weren't known, it's nice to know that you can pay that forward for other people when you get to that point. So yeah,
for sure. Yeah, one of my favorite things to do is help people get their podcast off the ground, because I didn't have that person. We just blindly stumbled through it. So it's always weird to find someone. My most recent experience, I'm sure I've told the story before, but do you know Jim Mahfood?
Yes.
So we had him on the podcast not too long ago, and I did the whole, we started in 2011 as Drink and Drive, all the pre-recording, stuff I always tell people, and he's like, I know, and I'm like, what do you mean you know? It's like, I know who you are, and I'm like, I don't understand. And he's like, well, you had Wax Taylor on your show, and I'm a big Wax Taylor fan. He's like, so I listened, and then you had Doc Hammer on the show, and he's a friend of mine, so I listened to that. And he's like, so I've heard your show, and I'm like, yeah, but what do you mean? I didn't know how to respond. I was just, it blew me away. And then in my brain, I'm like, I should be recording this.
Oh no! Yeah. A moment of validation. No, that's amazing.
So that was like my high point, I think, this year. So what are you working on now? Or can you talk about anything that you're working on now? I don't know about NDCs.
Yeah, so I have I'm NDA'd on, sadly,
NDA,
quite a lot of the stuff that I'm which is really frustrating, because it's all really good stuff, and I'm super excited to talk about it. In sort of non-specific terms, I'm working currently on designing a wargaming range, which is not something I've done before, like designing a range for tabletop.
Oh.
Yeah.
So like you're doing the art. I don't want to get. Are you doing the artwork for it, or the like sculpture-y type stuff?
So I'm not sculpting, but I am concepting, I suppose.
Okay, I got you.
Right. Which is a whole different ball game, and it's been a really great learning curve. Particularly because I'll send over designs and stuff, and they'll come back to me and they'll go, oh, we really like it. Our sculptor is crying. But, and I'm like, oh no!
How does she expect me to do that? It's not fair.
That's it. Yeah.
His 3D printing's bullshit.
yeah. I mean, but yeah. So that's amazing, and I can't wait to like be able to yell about that in detail. I'm working on a pilot issue of a comic with a writer that isn't me, which is I haven't done that in a little bit, so that's quite, that's me having to go kind of like, oh my god, my pencils have to make sense, oh no. And also working on the one that I can talk about. I'm working on the 5th issue of my comic series Cloven Bloodlines, which is, I wanted to get it done in time for the shows that we were doing this year, but it's basically now getting it done ASAP sort of scenario. But that's being worked on at the moment. The cover art is done. Really excited to get that out. So yeah, like working on a whole mix of stuff at the moment. But in the interest of treading lightly, sadly, I think that's probably as much detail as I can go into. But
where can people go to get your book? Is it available in comic shops, or is it like a?
So it is available in a couple of sort of high street stockists in the UK. So I've had my stuff in Forbidden Planet in London. And there's also a very nice comic shop who definitely deserve a shout out in Winchester, my hometown, CGC, who are a great bunch of lads, and they do an excellent job, and they are nice enough to keep stocking my comics, so I'm very grateful for that. Other than that, you can also pick it up through my website store. So the best thing to do is to find me on Twitter or Instagram at Inebri-art, and you can find links to my website through there, which is www.inebri-art.com. And new issues go up there as they are ready.
Nice. Yeah, that's we always got to get those plugs in, do that little self promotion. Yeah. But Kit, it was an absolute pleasure having you on the show, and I'm really anxious to hear about this tabletop because I'm such a gamer nerd. We'd love to, if you want to come back and talk about it when you're allowed to, we would love to have you back on.
Oh my goodness. That's very kind of you. I would absolutely love to. I think it is due. I think you should be hearing more about it next year.
Nice.
But yes, I will be yelling from the rooftops about the one. I'm very excited about it. So, but thank you so much for just letting me ramble. It's been really great.
That's it. I tell you, I love guests that like to talk. It's the ones that give you one word answers that you're like, kill me now. This is terrible.
Oh no. Yeah. I mean, just give me an excuse and off I go. So
it's awesome. So thanks again so much. We'll be in touch, and I'll let you know when this goes live. And for our listeners, thank you guys for listening. We'll catch you guys again next week.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. Thanks again for listening.